All right. So for today's advocate, we have Sydney Rendell joining us to talk about knowing your rights and protecting yourself from bullying, harassment, and disrespectful treatment. So, Sydney, I'll go ahead and turn it on over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me just switch this real quick. Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Sydney Rendell, and I am a licensed Florida attorney and the founder of Rendell Law, where I focus on education law, disability rights, and cyber harassment. My work is rooted in a deep passion for advocacy, specifically for students with disabilities, individuals navigating the education system, and those facing harassment or discrimination. And I have the privilege of supporting families and students and caregivers in both legal and educational settings, helping them understand and assert their rights with confidence. I'm honored to be here with you all today to talk about disability rights and how we can work together to create safer, more inclusive communities for everyone. So, for today's session, we're going to learn how to recognize disrespect and mistreatment in certain settings, understand your rights, and know how to speak up or ask for help. So, I am thrilled to do this presentation during Disability Pride Month, where we are commemorating the signing of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, on July 26, 1990. And I love this quote from Judy Human. So she says, Disability only becomes a tragedy when society fails to provide the things we need to lead our lives." Just thought I'd share that quote for Disability Pride Month. So for some statistics, I just wanted to go over these. I'm sure you all are very familiar with them, unfortunately. But I thought they were kind of important to give an overview. So, 4 in 10 adults with disabilities reported experiencing unfair treatment in healthcare settings, at work, or when applying for public benefits because of their disabilities. They are twice as likely, so adults with disabilities are twice as likely to report unfair treatment in one or more of those settings. And then 70% of disabled people experience some form of abuse or are 3 times more likely to experience sexual assault. And then a lot of this can be domestic abuse. So about, you know, it's often overlooked, but 70 to 85% of domestic abuse cases with people with disabilities often go unreported. So you have rights. So there's different federal laws that define disability slightly differently, but they generally follow some type of broad definition. So we have the ADA, which defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, a record of such impairment, or being regarded as having such impairment. The Florida Civil Rights Act is very similar. They define disability as the same as the ADA. And then we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, which defines a student with a disability as having one or more of the following 13 conditions that you all are probably familiar with. So, autism, deaf, a developmental delay, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disabilities, and kind of a multitude of other ones. And the key point for this is that disability must adversely affect the student's educational performance, and the student must need special education services to be eligible under the IDEA. And then we have Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1975. And this definition is a person is considered to have a disability under Section 504 if they have a physical or mental impairment, which substantially limits one or more major life activities, have a record of such impairment, or are regarded as having such impairment. And major life activities can be anything from caring for oneself, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating. So, all of those kind of major life activities Key point about the Section 504 is that it does not require that an individual needs special education, so only that their disability substantially limits a major life activity. So a little bit different than the IDEA. And then we have adult protection services. So this is a Florida statute, and they define a disability as, or a person with a disability is someone who's 18 or older who has an impairment that can be physical, mental, emotional, sensory, or developmental that makes it hard for them to care for themselves or to protect themselves. And just a few kind of broad notes on your rights. So you don't need to be receiving disability benefits like SSDI or SSI to be protected under these laws. You have rights whether your disability is visible or invisible. And then you also have the right to privacy. So when you're asking for accommodations or reporting discrimination, you can do that without sharing your full diagnosis or every detail about your diagnosis. I also put together this little chart. I feel like it's helpful of just seeing all the different definitions of disability under all the different laws. And then on the right, it has some examples of types of disabilities that it could cover. That's not all the disabilities, just a few examples. Okay. So, as you all are probably very familiar with, the ADA is a federal civil rights law that protects people with disabilities from being treated unfairly in many different areas of life. Discrimination means being treated unfairly or differently because of your disability. So, examples of ADA discrimination could be anything from a store refusing to let you bring in your service animal, or a job interview is canceled because the employer finds out you have a disability, or a city program or county program won't provide an interpreter for you if you're deaf, or a school that won't give you materials that are accessible for you. And harassment is a form of discrimination. So it means being bullied, threatened, treated badly because of your disability in a way that creates a hostile or unsafe environment for you. So examples of this could be a coworker mocking your disability repeatedly, a caregiver that yells at you, belittles you, or ignores your needs. It also could be a landlord that allows your neighbors to harass you because of your disability. And if this kind of treatment makes it hard for you to work, go to school, use services, or feel safe, then the ADA gives you the right to speak up and get help. So you can ask for accommodations, you can report discrimination or harassment, and you can take legal actions that will protect your rights from being violated. Okay. So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act is a federal civil rights law that protects people with disabilities from discrimination in any program or activity that receives federal financial assistance. So, any organization or agency that receives federal funds, this can include public schools, colleges, hospitals, certain health clinics, social services, day programs, public housing authorities, transportation services, government funding programs. And then discrimination under Section 504 means being denied participation in a program or service because of your disability, not receiving reasonable accommodations you need to access a service, and then also being excluded or treated unfairly in a federally funded program. And then harassment is a form of also discrimination in Section 504, and this can mean being bullied or harassed because of your disability. And the harassment can make it hard for you to learn, work, or participate, and maybe staff's ignoring your complaints or refusing to protect you. And under Section 504, they must provide equal access to service and opportunities, make those reasonable accommodations to support your participation, and then investigate and stop harassment when it's reported. Okay, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So, this protects people who have qualifying disabilities, like we discussed, and it protects against discrimination or harassment and bullying because of a disability, which could be being punished for a behavior related to your disability without appropriate support, being denied services in an individual's education plan, which is the IEP, being removed or isolated from classrooms without justification, or the school ignoring reports of mistreatment or failure to act on their part. Okay, so under Florida Statute 415, 102, Florida's adult perspective per Florida's Adult Protective Services, I always have a hard time saying that, APS systems, they protect adults 18 or older who have a mental, physical, or emotional or developmental disability, and those adults who are unable to care for or protect themselves from harm. And when someone reports or a suspected harm with APS, they will investigate the situation, then they will interview the adults or caregivers that were involved in the situation. They're going to determine if the adult is being abused, neglected, or exploited. And then they're going to offer protective services. So, that could be emergency housing, medical care, legal assistance, helping you change caregivers or environments. And in Florida, these agencies and individuals provide personal care to adults with disabilities, or agencies and individuals who provide this personal care to adults with disabilities often must be, licensed and regulated. And so those providers are overseen by the Agency for Health Care Administration and the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. So if a caregiver or a licensed provider um, is mistreating a resident, violating health or safety laws, or fails inspections, then they can face a couple different things. They can face fines, their license could be suspended or revoked, or they could also, in some situations, uh, receive criminal charges for abuse or neglect, and if it's found. Okay. So, what is bullying and harassment? The ADA requires that public entities must prevent and address disability-based harassment. So they must ensure that you participate equally and safely in their services. Section 504 requires that programs must take action to stop disability-based bullying. Schools must ensure that students with disabilities can learn in safe environments. And then if the bullying is affecting the student's ability to learn, this can be a denial of FAPE, which is free appropriate public education. And then the Fair Housing Act requires that landlords must respond to disability-based harassment. So their failure to act might make them legally responsible. Title I of the ADA and the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This is they say that employers must stop harassment and protect your rights. So if they don't, you can file a complaint with the EEOC. And then the Adult Protection Services laws. So they are going to be stopping abuse, exploitation, neglect in all of those different settings for adults with disabilities. And then I'll go over, just the broad kind of definition of bullying or harassment is when someone repeatedly hurts, threatens, intimidates, or excludes you because of your disability, whether that happens in person, online, through a program, or job, or housing provider. And a couple things to keep in mind. So, Intent doesn't always matter. So under the law, they focus on a lot of times the impact of the behavior. And then if the bullying makes it harder, like we said, to work, learn, live, or to participate, it may be illegal harassment. So providers and service providers, caregivers, they must treat you with dignity. So you must be treated with respect. You can make your own choices as much as possible. Be safe from abuse, neglect, and intimidation. Speak up without being punished or ignored. You can file a complaint if someone's hurting you or ignoring your needs. Living in housing without being treated unfairly, you have a right to that because of the Fair Housing Act. You can ask for reasonable accommodations, like anything from service dogs, ramps, reserved parking, and the list goes on and on. You also have the right to not be evicted or denied housing because of your disability. And so I wanted to kind of go over a couple of examples of what it would look like for a caregiver to mistreat you. So this could be anything from yelling, ignoring you, talking down to you, not helping with things that you need, like meals, medicine, hygiene, touching you in ways that makes you feel unsafe or unwanted, threatening to take away your services or your housing, and then refusing to follow your services or your support plan. And specifically with housing discrimination, it can look in like a couple different ways as well. So this could be maybe a landlord refuses to rent you to you because you have a disability, or they won't let you have a service animal even if it's documented, or if they make fun of you because of your disability or treat you differently than other tenants. They also could try to evict you for behaviors related to your disability without understanding or accommodating you. Those could all be forms of discrimination. So I wanted to kind of go through online harassment, and I think this is really relevant in today's world. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about it because I think it affects everybody. And I think in the disability community, it's not really talked enough about. So online harassment includes harmful or threatening behavior that takes place using digital devices or platforms. So think about, Reddit or Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, like all of the platforms we all use can be used for online harassment or discrimination. And so for people with disabilities, this could include just cyberbullying, name calling, threats, impersonating or fake profiles, doctoring images, videos, deep fakes, non-consensual sharing of personal information or images, and then exclusion from digital platforms or games or apps because of your disability, and then, mocking the use of assistive technology. So there's cyber harassment laws specifically in Florida that prohibit online stalking, threats, or non-consensual image sharing. And so I wanted to just put together a couple different steps on what to do if you feel like you're kind of in a situation that could be online harassment or discrimination. And so if someone's threatening you, it's the best thing to do is probably just block them. Don't reply to the hateful messages. Ask someone you trust for help for doing that if you need assistance. I would also say it's really important as an attorney that takes these types of cases is to collect evidence. So take the screenshots and save them of the abusive messages or comments, of the username of the person that's doing it, the date and time of when it happened, the platform or app that they were using, and to keep them in a safe folder where you can, go to them if you ever need to when it comes to hiring an attorney. And then I would also say step 3 is to report to the app or the website. This can be a little tricky, so sometimes I have people that just need a little bit of assistance with this, and I'm always happy to help. But if not, there are some forms or charts online that kind of show you how to do this, just depending on what the website or app is. So I'll just add, if you do use a screen reader, these platforms often have accessibility settings in their help section. So you could search platform, like the platform name. So, Instagram accessibility help, and then say, how to remove a user. And it will pop up on how to kind of do that step by step. So a lot of these platforms have at least the accessibility settings for you to use in the help section. The other step I would say is to adjust your settings to make them safer. So, whether that's like being private or, having friends only or just blocking or muting people or turning off comments sometimes. You can really use those to help filter out some of the harmful words. Then obviously, if you feel unsafe or somebody's threatening you or you feel in danger, obviously calling number 911. There also is the Florida Cybercrime Office, and they on their website you can report harassment or accessibility issues to the Department of Justice or the Office for Civil Rights. And then I would also say, there are certain situations where getting support by an attorney is needed. And so if that is something that you feel you are going through, I'm always happy to talk with you. I do free consultations. And like I said, I think this is something that in the disability community we're not talking about enough. And it needs to be taken really seriously because a lot of people are, silently struggling through this type of online abuse. Okay, so what can you do if you're not being treated right? And so, like we said, speaking up. So using your voice to let the people know that you don't want this behavior. So whether that's just being respectful and firm and using phrases like "please don't speak to me that way" or "I deserve to be treated with respect," that makes me uncomfortable. And then I would also write these things down. So keeping a record of what's happening is super important. So whether that is who's involved, what did they say or do, when and where did it happen, were there any witnesses there as well. So using a journal or a phone note or asking someone to help you write it down is really important, especially if you're wanting to file a complaint. Then I would also say tell someone you trust. So, family members, support coordinators, or case managers, friends, advocates. Let them know what's happening and just talk it over with them. And then I would also say you have, the legal right to report mistreatment or discrimination. So, who you report to does depend on the situation, but you can always ask an attorney or an advocate to help you walk through that complaint process or see what types of resources are out there to help you file a complaint or at least let someone know about the situation that's going on. I did develop this little chart to go through the situations, different situations, whether that's a caregiver or a housing situation, or whether you're being bullied or harassed at a school or in a program, or you're mistreated at work. So on the right, it says where to report. These are the different types of agencies that you could go to report these different types of situations. So being your own advocate, I'm sure you all have heard that your whole lives, and it's very, very important. But you have the right to be treated with respect and to ask for reasonable accommodations, to say something when it doesn't feel right, and to get that support when you're standing up for yourself. So, ways to advocate for yourself, obviously speaking up, saying when something feels wrong or unfair, asking for what you need. So, whether that's, I need extra time to complete this form, or, hey, do you mind, enlarging the text so I can see it better? Whatever it is that you need, asking for it. And then using those tools to support your voice. So, That can mean, writing things down ahead of time, bringing someone with you to help ask certain questions, using this assistive technology or communication tools that you use. And, it's important to know your legal rights. That's why we're going over them. And then keeping notes and records of those important conversations you're having. So just to remember, being your own advocate means using your voice to protect your rights. You matter and you deserve to be heard. So here's a couple different just places where to get help. So the Office for Civil Rights, like we talked about, you can do certain discrimination complaints on their website. The EEOC is job discrimination. The Protective Services is where you can complain about abuse or neglect. And then the Florida Department of Children, Families, and Abuse Hotline is a great resource as well. And there's a couple of different complaints with the Office for Civil Rights and the EEOC that can be pretty intricate. And so I always advise that, you know, even if you can't afford an attorney or have an attorney help you through that complaint process and helping you draft the complaint, we're happy to also just go over what that process looks like and how we would do it, even if that just means a consultation phone call to walk you through it. So I wanted to say just thank you so much for having me. I added here my contact information. If you have any questions or would like to discuss a specific situation, I'm happy to speak with you. This is all that I do. I'm very passionate about the disability community and helping support you all. So I do free consultations. So happy to discuss if you have any questions. I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney. Do we
Of
have
course.
any questions from anyone who's here? Let's give a minute I see someone writing down your contact info, so just gonna give it a,
Did I stop sharing? One moment.
there you go. Awesome. And we will also, like I said, put this up on the website with the rest of our advocates so that it's available for anyone to access whenever they need this kind of information. And we really appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Everyone have a great night.
You too. Bye bye.